Now, real science. Is this state's marine parks no-take policy of designated fish sanctuaries working? The Marine Park Network has been expanding for the last 10 years with the objective of conserving biodiversity. Now there's a debate about the effectiveness of the network. The Shooters and Fishers Party, with significant crossbench power in the upper house, has won conditional support from the O'Farrell government for a 5-year moratorium on any extension of this state's marine park network. The party questions the science behind the marine parks. Why? We invited the author of the Marine Parks Moratorium Bill, Robert Brown MLC of the Shooters and Fishers Party, to drop in for a chat. Mr Brown, whose car carries some illuminating stickers, recently headed a parliamentary inquiry into the marine park system in New South Wales, which he says helped form his view that the science behind them needs to be well-based. There are 6 marine parks so far along the New South Wales coast. There's Lord Howe Island way off the coast. There's Byron Bay on the far north coast. There's the Solitary Islands Marine Park along the Coffs Harbour coast. Port Stephens and Great Lakes Marine Park. There's Jarvis Bay and the latest, Bateman's Marine Park. You can see all the zones on the Marine Parks Authority website. The no-take sanctuaries within these parks are, of course, the most politically contentious. You can't wet a line in such sanctuaries. Penalties apply. On June the 7th, Primary Industries Minister Katrina Hodgkinson and Environment Minister Robin Parker announced that environmental scientist, Associate Professor Bob Beaton of the University of Queensland, would head an expert panel to audit the effectiveness of this state's existing marine park zoning arrangements. Professor Beaton told 7:30 New South Wales via email that he was committed to an independent scientific assessment to address the government's 9 terms of reference. Significantly, the Greens Party has not objected to either Professor Beaton or the terms of reference.
Drawing lines on a map is not the right way to protect marine diversity. Fish don't read lines on maps, Quentin. Simple as that.
Robert Brown and the Shooters and Fishers Party support the government's audit of the conservation zones.
I'll give you a perfect example of how the science wasn't done properly. In Jarvis Bay, they put a sanctuary zone in the wrong place. They had to flip the whole sanctuary zone 180 degrees, move it a couple of kilometres north because they'd made a mistake with the science. Now, if they make a mistake that big, the review is correct in saying they need to go back and do the science on a park-by-park basis to demonstrate that what they've done is in fact working.
Well, Quentin, I must say, as a scientist who's been involved in this program, I think it's rather offensive to say it was done in such an arbitrary way. The lines were drawn to maximise the amount of different sorts of important habitats that could be contained within protected zones, and certain favourite fishing spots were avoided. In fact, so really the exact lines on maps were adjusted only for social reasons, I felt. The pig represents no-take sanctuary zone.
David Booth, Professor of Marine Ecology at UTS, has been involved in the development of the marine park system.
If you go and sort of have it jigging 100 metres to the left and 100 metres to the right, it's very difficult to expect a fisher to respect that.
In Coffs Harbour was that the community consultation was not up to scratch. The same argument applies for Jarvis Bay. Now up there, the local fishermen got their heads together, we're talking commercial and amateur fishermen, and they came up with a plan to extend the current 12% of the National Park Sanctuary Zone to about 16.5 to 17. No, Frank Sardor wasn't interested in that. He wanted 20% because 20% is what the Greens want. So we're not applying science, we're applying political
politics
science. That's exactly right.
I agree, politics enters into it, and as a scientist we often hope that science has a prime role, but it doesn't always do so. And I'd say that works in both directions. I mean, I'm sure there's conservation people who want 100%, and there's fishers that want 0. So to end up with 7% of the New South Wales coast, only 7%, suggests, I don't know what you'd conclude about which side seems to have got the upper hand, the zeros or the hundreds.
There's no evidence to suggest that you can't have certain types of recreational fishing in sanctuary zones.
My concern is when you're actually enforcing, doing real-world enforcement of marine parks, the best way to do it is to have areas where no fisherman or fisher person should be deploying gear at all.
Professor Booth says the government audit should now consider extending marine parks to protect biodiversity in the Hawkesbury region.
That's political dynamite. The real question for you as a scientist, though, is the Hawkesbury in danger?
Oh, the Hawkesbury is in danger in many ways, and it's not just fishing. There's all sorts of runoff issues and that sort of thing. And I'm not saying that's necessarily the place a park we put. The other thing we know as scientists is that it's not just important to have individual parks. It's a ladder of them up and down the coast so that fish that disperse can connect between them.
The problem with the setting up of the marine parks was that the recreational fishers saw it as a political exercise. They saw the consultation with them as simply being used to find the best areas where the fish were, and those were the areas that were included in the sanctuary zones. It was simply a question of where would you reckon would be the most fish guys? Oh, they're on that map. Great, that's a sanctuary zone. So naturally, they're suspicious.
But don't you acknowledge, Mr Brown, that given the nature of the depletion of the fish stocks, a no-take sanctuary was the most expedient method of maintaining the sustainability of the fish stock?
Well, your assertion that we've got depleted fish stocks is wrong to start off with. New South Wales has got some of the best managed fisheries in the world.
But we're importing 60% of our fish to the fish market.
Exactly.
60%.
Exactly. And yet, New South Wales is a low production fishery compared to other parts of the world.
A number of species are at the limit of their fishing, and they're often recreational fish species, but not always, are definitely depleted from historic levels.
Based on this debate, it appears Professor Bob Beaton and his expert panel will have a lot of work to do to determine how many more fish are in the estuaries and the seas of New South Wales as a direct consequence of the network of marine park sanctuaries. Over to you, Professor Beaton.